Hello, how you guys doing? So today here we're at Universal. We're going to show you how I took these photos. I'm going to put a link right up here that from a video that I did that explains all the scare zones, and we walk around them during the day and during the night, so you more or less get an idea of how the light is in both situations. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the camera settings that we will be using for this event. Now, before I talk about the settings, note that these are the settings that I like to use. I'm sure there's a bunch of other ways that you can shoot them. Again, I am just doing this video for informational purposes, for you guys can see what settings I used, as I do not consider myself a professional photographer, nor I have mentioned that I am one. Now, the first one is actually the day shots, which is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. A lot of light coming in, so many times you don't need to worry about settings, and you can even shoot sometimes this stuff in automatic. But when it comes to me, there's one of the settings that makes up the exposure that I like to lock in, which is the f-stop. And what I like to do in these cases is set my f-stop to the widest possible, which is in this case the lowest number on the camera. And what that does is it gives that really cool effect where the scare actor's in front and you got all that really cool bokeh effect, which is the stuff that is out of focus in the back. Now, when it comes to the metering mode, you can use any of the other metering modes besides the spot, which is usually what we use for the darker ones. Any other metering modes will work, since basically the whole scene is going to be lit, so you don't need to worry about that. Now, another thing that I will use is actually the L servo, which is the autofocus mode, which means that as soon as you press the shutter button, the camera is going to continuously focus. Now remember, scare actors are not just there posing for you, they're running around and stuff like that. So you want to set it to where as soon as you press the shutter speed and you're pointing at them, the camera is continuously focusing. Now, when it comes to nighttime, I will change to a different mode, and the reason for that is I am no longer interested in what is the aperture priority. I am more interested in locking down what is the shutter speed. And the reason for that is as soon as it starts getting darker and the sunset and all that stuff, you'll see that sometimes the camera will start bringing down the shutter speed to try to be able to get the best possible photo. Now, yes, there's ways to set that on your camera automatically, but in my case, it's something that I like to control. And usually when it comes to that, I'll set my shutter speed to usually one of 200 of a second, and sometimes 125 of a second, depending on what's happening. And the cool thing is having the camera set to shutter priority is that the dial on the top that you use will control the shutter. And that way you can roll that up and down depending on the scenes and stuff like that. So you'll see that some of the shots that we take darker in some of the other scare zones, I actually roll it down to actually even sometimes to 1/40th of a second, because I see that the scare actor is not moving and I'm trying to adjust it to be able to get the best quality photo with the person in the scene. In this case, if they're standing and they're not running around, I could lower that good enough to be able to get a really good shot, like some of the shots I'm going to show you here shortly. Now, when it comes to setting stuff like this into darker situations, you do have to be able to see how much your camera is able to push on the ISO. And what I mean by that is not all the cameras are good on high ISOs. For example, I have the Canon R, which is what I use to shoot these photos, which is really good in high ISO situations. But I know that my other camera, which is the Canon 80D, anything over ISO 6400 starts to introduce a lot of grain and the photos somewhat become unusable. So you got to know what the limits of your camera and the lens are. So keep that in consideration. Now, the third setting that I'm talking about is actually the one that has to deal with the show with fire. And this is a really interesting one because it's actually there's a couple of settings that we're going to do here to adjust for that. Now, fire itself is really bright, so consider it something that's going to easily overexpose your image, which you do not want, because you know that once it's overexposed and it's white, there's really no way from coming back from that. So what we're going to do is actually we're going to use the night settings, and we're going to make sure that our metering is set to spot. But then we're going to come to the exposure compensator bar here on the bottom, and we're going to bring it down 1 or 2 stops. And what that's going to do is actually underexpose the image. Once the camera sees what's the perfect setting, we're going to say, okay, this is perfect, but underexpose it because we want to be able to catch the fire in all its glory. Now, another important thing, since we're doing underexposure and stuff like this, we want to make sure that we're always shooting in RAW format, because RAW format will allow us to later then come back into the camera, bring the exposure up and not lose any of those details. And then once we do that, we could bring it to the computer and adjust the fire and show all its really cool orangey yellow colors to it without having it to be overexposed. Now another thing that I would highly recommend is, if possible, do the stay-in screen, which is when you come into the park before the event actually starts, and you have to have a pass already for the park, for the regular parks, and you'll be able to get in, and then you'll stop in certain areas, and those certain areas are some corals which are pretty good, because you get somewhat into the event before everybody else, and many times they actually let you go inside some of the houses before they open up to the other people. When it comes to the lenses that I'm using for these photos, as you can see, they're pretty tight and they're pretty zoomed in into the faces of the scare actors. I like to use, in this case, a prime lens, which is one of my favorite lenses, to be honest, which is the 85mm f1.8, because that way I can really zoom in from a distance, and it's really sharp. And being a f1.8, it allows a lot of light in, so when it starts getting darker, I can still be able to get some really good shots without the ISO going too high. So we're coming up on the first one, which is here right on the main street, and right here on the right hand side you got the pumpkin lord that actually parks here. And this one's pretty well lit, to be honest with you, because you got the lights coming off from the store here. So this one you don't gotta worry, and he's also well lit as well. This scare zone, while it has a ton of pumpkins here on the top, for some reason I think it's probably one of the darkest ones that we have, one of the darkest scare zones. So when it comes to photos, to be honest with you, I like to shoot stuff when the people are somewhat inside the spotlights. Like for example, you see you got those spotlights up here, so when the scare actors stand around this area like this, if the light's hitting them, you can probably get some good shots. But trying to get them inside here when it's pure dark is just, it's practically impossible, to be honest with you. So again, you want to look for when they're standing in the light. And another spot that they usually stand is usually right here, and because it's got the spotlights on them from both sides, so that's probably one of the best spots too. Okay, now the next area is actually this one, which is probably the biggest and widest street of all of them, to be honest with you. And this one is pretty cool and pretty easy to take photos, because there's a lot of light on this coming off from the buildings. So for this one's a good one to sort of like get the settings down on your camera and locking them in. And again, like I said, this one has all the light coming in off of the sides of the buildings. Coming up on another scare zone here, which is another really cool one. This one actually has like a little stage show going on all night. This one is great for photos, because like I said, this part is like really well lit up, and there's like a person here doing some witchcraft here on the pot and everything. And this one, to be honest with you, you can actually get some really good shots using some of the objects that are onto the side, and take some crazy cool shots like this. Guys, so that's it here from Universal Studios. Hope you enjoyed this video showing you how the photos I took here at Halloween Horror Nights. Now if there's any other video you'd like to see of how I took certain photographs, feel free to comment below. I gladly put it in the queue and generate a video for you guys. So until then, stay awesome guys. See ya. Bye.